So, Ambassador, I have a number of questions here which some you may not want to answer. Now that the European Union has a permanent president of the European Council, who has taken on many of the responsibilities of the rotating presidency, what kind of role is left for the rotating presidency?
Well, for the rotating presidency, the role is to, in Brussels and in Budapest, in the capital of the rotating president, to chair many of the meetings, the meetings of the different ministerial meetings, and set the agenda. Part of the agenda, of course, is inherited from past presidencies, but there are items or priorities that the rotating presidency can define, and I will talk about that in a second. And then, if there are compromises to work out between the member countries, then of course the Prime Minister of the Presidency or the Minister that is heading one of the ministerial groups has to try to come to a compromise. So the role of the President is, as such, still important, but of course the President of the Council, Mr. Van Rompuy, has a very important role to play together with the Prime Minister of the Presidency. Now, as far as the work of the ambassador here is concerned, our work is together with the ambassador from the European Union to inform our friends in the United States about what are the proceedings, how are the priorities of the presidency are being developed, and as well as informing the other ambassadors of how the discussions are going in Brussels and in Budapest, but we are doing that together with the ambassador of the EU.
Was not the original intention, having in fact appointed a president of the European Council, that the rotating presidencies will be phased out?
For the time being, in the Lisbon agenda, in the Lisbon Treaty, the idea is that the role of the presidency is still what I have just said. But of course, I can imagine that in the future, in the more distant future, there will be a point where the EU, the Commission and the President of the Council may be playing a bigger role, increasingly bigger role.
Every presidency brings a list of issues of regional and specific national interest it wants to address during its 6 months. What is the Hungary list?
The Hungary list is, the title of it is a strong Europe with a human touch. Strong Europe right now essentially means a much stronger economic governance. The 2008 financial crisis has brought to the fore the weaknesses of economic cooperation within the European Union. So there are a series of steps being discussed and being taken eventually that would strengthen economic cooperation, financial discipline. The Stability and Growth Pact is being strengthened, both the preventive part of it and the corrective part of it. Just to say a few details of it, for instance,
please do.
For instance, the debt, the government debt, will have a bigger role to play in the preventive and also in the corrective arm of the Stability and Growth Pact, because there will be a sort of excessive deficit there is an excessive deficit procedure now. If the deficit of the budget exceeds 3% of GDP, there is the so-called excessive deficit procedure against this country. Now, if the debt exceeds 60% of GDP, there will be a similar excessive debt procedure for the country. There is also a new element which is called the macroeconomic imbalances. If a country is judged that it's under macroeconomic imbalances, severe macroeconomic imbalances, then the Commission can issue recommendations that the country has to take to eliminate the excessive economic imbalances. So this is a very significant strengthening of the economic discipline within the European Union. There is also the so-called European semester, by which the countries have to present their economic program for next year, for the year coming after the presentation of the plan, and there it has to abide by the directives given by the Commission and the Council. All these measures are to strengthen economic cooperation, and as a result of that also strengthen the eurozone and the existence of the euro, the functioning of the euro, because as you know, the euro has been under stress over the past year or so, and there has been talk about that maybe the euro will break up, the eurozone will break up, and I don't think that will happen. This is a very, very strong commitment of the European Union and the members of the European Union to have a strong euro. And although Hungary is not a member of the eurozone, we very much are in favor of a strong euro, because we want stability in the region, and eventually we would like to join the eurozone.
You mentioned, of course, that you are not, in fact, that you are still dealing, that the forint is still your
Yes.
currency, and the Czechs have a corresponding situation. And in fact, most of the East European countries who joined in the second enlargement, I think it's the second enlargement. But do you feel at this point, given what's happened, relief or disappointment that you were not already in the eurozone when the crisis hit Europe?
I am of the opinion that for small open economies like Hungary, integrated as much as it is into the European Union by trade, by financial transactions, it is an advantage to be the member of the eurozone. It has been shown by many studies that for small open economy, an independent exchange rate is more of a source of shock than a source of shock absorber, than as a shock absorber, when it is integrated so much into an economic unity like the European Union. That said, to join the eurozone, you have to satisfy some criteria, which is called the Maastricht criteria, and I think you have to satisfy those criteria on a sustainable basis. The budget deficit has to be below 3%, the inflation has to be low, the debt has to be approaching 60% or preferably below 60%, and I think a country should join the European Union, the eurozone, only when it is satisfying those criteria in a sustainable manner.
As you've outlined new measures that are being taken by the European Union in order to strengthen its sort of the euro the situation in the eurozone. Of course, one could say that it would have been better to actually have instituted these measures before the crisis and when the eurozone was established, rather than after the crisis. It's a bit like shutting the door after the barn door after the horses escaped. But these are all institutional changes which many think are really going to reduce the ability of individual countries to actually manage their own economy and give up more dependence to Brussels. Is that the way you feel about it?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, as I said, economically, in a region that is as much integrated by trade in the areas of trade and financial transactions as is the European Union. It's a fully open market, open trade, open capital markets. In that case, having an independent exchange rate and monetary policies, as I said, has been proven that it's more a source of shock than a shock absorber. Many studies have shown, I myself have done such studies, and unambiguously it shows that. But of course it means that you have to have a disciplined economic policy. Now you can have good and bad policies within or without the eurozone. The key thing is that you have to have good policies. And if you have good policies, it's better to be in the eurozone. If you have bad policies, that's bad whether you are in the eurozone or outside the eurozone.
However, let me just make this one further point about the eurozone. The problems with within the eurozone are far from over, and there are still countries which many regard, especially many critics and many commentators in this country, regard as being on the brink. Not just Ireland and Greece, but also Spain is mentioned, and also, by some people, Italy is mentioned. Do you think that there are the resources available, even globally, to be able to shore up the euro at this point?
Well, you know, the comparison doesn't have to be made that eurozone is good or bad compared to, say, very often they look at the United States and they say the United States has a common currency, but it speaks the same language. The movement of labor is free and much more flexible. Look at Europe, you know, different cultures, different institutional setups. Labor mobility is more restricted. You cannot have an optimal currency area. This is a wrong comparison. The right comparison is what is the eurozone versus the non-euro world. And if you look at what would happen if countries are outside of the eurozone, when there is a crisis as it was in 2008, 2009, what would have happened? In countries like Italy, Portugal, and Spain that have high budget deficits, exchange rate would have been depreciated, very large inflation, the interest rates would have shot up, all bad for the growth of the economy. Now, they are within the eurozone. They did follow policies that are now looked at as not conducive to sustainable growth, but it would have been even worse if they had been outside of the eurozone. Now you have to find ways of overcoming that crisis within the eurozone. Two things. These are the ones that I mentioned: the strengthening the economic cooperation. It's very, very important. Second, you can deal with the debt system, trying to find financing, or this is being done. This is being discussed. And I think it's feasible. The countries will have to take tough measures, but I think those measures will be less tough and less detrimental to long-term growth if it's done within the framework of the eurozone.
In the case of Hungary, of course, it is not being done within the framework of the eurozone, because you have to deal with the double problem of actually having to confront the economic problems within Hungary itself, and then also to deal with the fact that you deal with countries which are in the eurozone, which is putting, as I understand it, a lot of pressure on your economy, a lot of pressure on the forint, perhaps to be devalued, and has led to some draconian economic measures. For example, the whole business of the pensions is one item. How is the Hungarian government going to handle this in the long term?
Well, one has to remember that Hungary has announced that it will join the eurozone under the government of Viktor Orban, who is right now the Prime Minister. During 1998 and 2002, there was a program of joining the eurozone by 2007. And however, the government that came into power afterwards followed very irresponsible fiscal policies. The deficit increased to over 10% of GDP. The debt, the GDP ratio went from around 50% to close to 80%. So we lost that opportunity to join the eurozone before the crisis hit. Now we are saddled with the crisis outside of the eurozone. Now we have to make Hungary a much more competitive economy, reduce the deficit, reduce the debt, and it's being done. Hungary will have this year a deficit of below 3%, slightly below 3%, and the debt GDP ratio will begin to decline. These have required very tough measures, but also Hungary has to improve the competitiveness of the economy, which includes not just fiscal measures, but which includes measures in the areas of education, improving the use, adoption and use of technology, putting order in the loss-making state enterprises, revamping our health system, revamping our pension system. So there's a lot of work being done or initiated right now. There will be measures announced within a couple of months in many of the areas of so-called structural reforms that require a longer period of time to implement, but it will be announced what it will be, and hopefully the economy within a few years will be in a position whereby we can announce a date for entering the eurozone.
As you happen to be represent the presidency of the EU, I can really ask you this: what about the rest of the East European countries? For example, the Czech Republic. Do you think that they're on the same in the same time frame as yourselves?
The economy of the Czech Republic is doing reasonably well. It's a political decision whether the country wants to join the eurozone or not. And I am not privy to the thinking of the government of how soon they would like to join the eurozone. You know, it's an obligation for the new members to join the eurozone.
So, if you're saying that you could announce your intentions in 2014, you will actually be joining at the beginning of the new budget, 2014-2020, yes? And that, I mean the EU budget.
Yeah, okay.
And that, of course, is something which is going to be discussed and formulated under your presidency.
Yes, but there is no strict connection between the European Commission's budget and when you join the European Union.
Yes, but I was just wondering, I mean, what I was trying to do was lead into the question, and I obviously did a bad job of it. But what I'm trying to say is, this seems to me to be one of the challenges facing your presidency, which is that you're going to, in fact, be the pilot, if you like, for the 2014-2020 2020 EU budget.
Yes, this is part of the presidency starts to continue the discussions and furthering the discussions on the way toward an agreement on that. But we do not expect an agreement on this during our presidency.
I see. Right. How do you react to questions within the European Union, for example, from the Luxembourg Foreign Minister, whether Hungary should take the presidency because of its recent measures such as the press law?
You know, we are not happy about the upheaval that the media law has the media law has created, and it. But however, I must say that many people who criticize the media law has actually not read the media law. The media law is definitely in favor of free press. It contains elements that are in other media laws within the European Union. There have been a lot of misunderstanding about the media law by people, as I said, who have not read the report. The way out of this is that the government has said that it will make the changes that the European Union and the Commission thinks that are necessary. The European Commission has written a letter, which are those parts of the law that are not consistent with EU regulations, or rather that create some doubts about the consistency. This is how they have put it with EU regulations. The Hungarian government has written a letter in which it said that why are those regulations put in the budget, but if the EU thinks that it is against the EU regulations, then the Hungarian government will make the necessary changes and ask for the experts to sit down and look at what changes are necessary.
There is dialogue between the EU and the Hungarians about how this media law should be modified, altered?
Modified.
What was the purpose behind the new law in the first place?
The new law in the first place was that parts of the law were still done under the communist system, which did not, which actually, had they been used to the text, could have meant a much stricter regulation of the press that the new law states. Secondly, with the multiplication of the electronic media, you had to find some ways of regulating some aspects of it. There have been a lot of misunderstanding of what people thought that you could regulate private blogs. Obviously, you cannot. It's not in the law. You cannot even do it technically. It's impossible. Only some aspects are regulated. The ones that provide news to the public. Then there has been a misunderstanding of what is a requirement of balanced reporting. This is in the laws of many countries, and balanced reporting is a requirement that cannot be fined. There is no fine for that in Hungary. That has been misunderstood, and nobody has ever said that even if you levy fines, the plaintiff can go to the court and all the way to the Supreme Court, if it goes to the court, it has a delaying effect on paying the fines. And the idea is, that this is actually a much more democratic law than the previous one was. I wanted to talk about the other aspects of the priorities, because as I said...
Well, as a matter of fact, I was going to say I had expected you to talk about things like the Danube strategy, for example.
Yeah, if I can say so, when I say the strong Europe is a human touch, the strong part of it is the economic cooperation.
And the human touch.
A human touch, I wanted to say. One is the Roma strategy.
Right.
This is a very important aspect. This is actually a Hungarian initiative, is that in Central and Eastern Europe, the Roma population is very important. In some countries, it is 10% of the whole population, and in Central and Eastern Europe, there are about 12 million Romas, whose integration is far behind that it should be in a normal democratic society. So Hungary is initiating a framework for Europe, how to a framework that would set the strategy for Europe for Roma integration. That's one aspect of it. And at the same time, Hungary itself is initiating measures that would show where some of the things that we are doing could be perhaps done in other countries as well. That's one aspect of the thing. The second is that we are, and it comes more under the strong part of Europe, energy independence, diversifying the sources and the routes of energy in Europe. And one aspect that Hungary is pushing, and with some success, is to establish the north-south interconnection between the different countries' gas pipelines. We have already signed Hungary has already signed an agreement, I think, with the Slovak government, and there are discussions with Poland, Czech Republic, to do the same. This is one of the priorities. And then there's the Danube strategy, which includes 14 or 15 countries. I will have to look at when you send it back to me. Out of which I think 8 are European Union members and the rest are non-European members. And this is really a regional strategy. The purpose of this is also to extend the economic cooperations toward the south, the countries that are not yet members of the European Union.
I see.
To bring them closer in cooperation, have common programs, economic programs, common projects.
And there was also a plan to bring Romania and Bulgaria into the Schengen Agreement?
There are 2 other priorities. One is the enlargement. Hungary is very much in favor of enlarging the European Union toward Croatia, wants Croatia to be a member, and it looks like under the presidency the discussions can be closed, and maybe just a signature, or even the signature can be done during the presidency, and maybe just the approval by the parliaments of the other countries might not be finished during the presidency. But it will, the agreement would be signed hopefully under the presidency. And of course, Hungary is also pushing to advance the joining of Serbia, Macedonia, etc. Continue the discussions with the European Union. Hungary is also pushing for extending the Schengen zone to Romania and Bulgaria.
Well, and finally, as you are in effect the Hungarian ambassador to the United States, can I just ask you to give me an idea of the current U.S.-Hungarian relations?
The current U.S.-Hungarian relations are very good. We are a very firm ally of the United States within NATO. We are shoulder to shoulder in Afghanistan. We have been in Iraq. We cooperate in all aspects of security, including anti-terrorism, and the transatlantic relationship between Hungary and the United States are strong and good.
Do you feel that the rejection or the reversal of the decision to put the anti-ballistic, anti-missile system in your country and in the Czech Republic has increased your vulnerability? The Danube strategy, as far as I know, has no financing. The idea of extending the Schengen Agreement runs into problems with both Berlin and Paris. How frequently do the so-called smaller countries, with respect, find themselves being, in a sense, pushed aside by the bigger countries in the European Union? Because a part of what your Prime Minister says seems to suggest that he is in fact referring to this idea of the younger countries, the smaller countries, requiring a more equitable voice in the European Union.
Well, you know, I mean, the fact of life is that some countries have a bigger or a stronger possibility to let their views prevail than some other countries. But if you have good arguments and you can convince your partners that it's in the interest of the other countries as well, then you can further an idea. And there has been in the European Union many examples for that. And just the fact that Hungary is explaining to the European Union that things that concern France and Germany about bringing into the Schengen zone Romania and Bulgaria, that things are, the reality is better than they think, and that they are prepared in many areas or in all areas to join the Schengen zone. You know, it's your job to try to convince them. And I think if you have good arguments based on reality, you can achieve something. Maybe if it's not even in that period, but the fact that you have put it on the table and explained, maybe in the next presidency it will come. This is how Europe works, you know. I mean, you have followed that long enough. You start an idea and you push and you push and you push, and little by little people understand that this is good, this is necessary, and you do it. I mean, the Stability and Growth Pact came into effect after the Maastricht criteria. The Stability and Growth Pact goes through its second major reform, you know, and there will be others, I am sure. And it all goes in the area of strengthening the economic cooperation, and at the end, it will be such that the eurozone will not go through this type of crises anymore, hopefully, than it has been in the past. That's the story of Europe. We have been doing Europe for 60 years, as you know, and it has always gone through this process, and it will continue.
Mr. Ambassador, I thank you on behalf of myself and also on behalf of Diplomatic Connections.
Thank you very much.